Good afternoon, good afternoon. It is Saturday, February 11th, believe it or not. We're just getting you all ready. I know tomorrow is the Super Bowl, and tomorrow's going to be the Super Bowl. We're not going to be doing a live broadcast tomorrow, and I'm actually thinking going forward, we'll probably not do a live broadcast on Sundays. But we'll probably stick to like Monday through Saturday if we can. I think that makes total sense. I think it works out perfectly. If you missed yesterday's video, feel free to take a look at that video. It does go into we covered more about DNF and installing packages, setting up local repositories, remote repositories, things like that, as well as some stuff about user accounts. So today, what I'd like to do is continue where we left off with user accounts. And so one of the big questions folks ask me is why is it that user accounts are your favorite topic to talk about? And the reason for me is because I just like locking things down and taking away access and taking away setting up restrictions any way I can. So that's what we're going to really go into a deeper dive of today. Yesterday we went inside of, let me see, we're going to go into directly on to today's VM. I'm going to go into is the CentOS one. And I'm going to go full screen on this one, and we'll say CentOS VM1. Alright, as you can see, this is the VM that we set up. We've been having, you probably can tell, I've been having a lot of fun back here, setting up, configuring SSH and things like that, but we're not going to really go into too much about SSH today, which again, we'll get into a different day. But I want to explain about user accounts for a second, and one of the things, and how you should set these things up for best practice. For the exam, I would say focus on user add. This is to create a user, and it gives you some options here. We kind of went over this, a synopsis of this yesterday. But you're probably wondering if you don't specify all of these, what happens? Do you need to really specify this? The answer is no. You do not need to specify all this when you create a user account in Linux. You do not need to specify all that because we actually have a special config file that generates these directories. So if we go to cd etc default, use default to the default directory, and then go to I'm just going to say sudo vim user add. That's what it is. So you see how this is the config file for what it sets up when you first set one up. It sets up the group by default. This is the default home directory for every user. Inactive is -1. We'll go over that a little bit later. This is create the mail spool folder for the user. This is the scale file, which basically it pulls the directories for every user outside of the standard ones. This one is their default shell, and then expire is if you want to set each of them to have an expiration date. So this is the default expiration date for when that account expires. And so let's say, for instance, to get more, let's see if we want more information. Go back to main user add here. I'm going to say default. Hold on. User add. And there it is. So this is the remember we were talking about expiration of accounts? So this sets up by default. This sets up the date on which the user account will be disabled. The date is specified in this particular format. And it also says, if not specified, User add will use a default expiry date specified by the expire variable in that config in this file that I just showed you. The etc /etc/default/ user add, or an empty string by default, which basically means the accounts do not expire. Now, what it does not do, which it shows, so if you want, let's say you were dealing with people, this was Barnes IT, and I hired just a bunch of temporary contractors to do, to set me up whip me up a new server for virtualization, and their contract is set for only 90 days. Then you would set the expiration date by default for every user to be 90 days, which in this case, if 90 days, it'd be we're looking at May 11th. So that's what this is. Inactive, the number of days after a password expires until the account is permanently disabled. A value of 0 disables the account as soon as the password has expired, and a value of -1 disables the feature. It gets continued. If not specified, user add will use a default inactivity period specified by the inactive variable in etc/default/user add, and so or -1 by default. So basically what inactive is -1. If we go back to that file, -1 basically means the account is never disabled. The password could expire, but it's never disabled. But if I set this to 0, this means when that password expires, their account is blocked immediately. No questions asked. When their account expires, that's it. Their account is disabled. And they cannot log in. So that again, that's if you really want to get more granular and go a little more overkill. But we'll go into, I'm going to continue to go down this rabbit hole of about user add, and you can specify the accounts, specify the scale directory. I know, again, yes, I'm aware that yes, you can specify all this, but I don't like doing it this way because you have to do it for every single account. So instead of trying to do it for every single account, honestly, if you want to make a change, just do it in /etc/default/user add. Just make the changes there. That way you get it for everybody. That's what that basically does. So this is about SE Linux. These are the default values, which the account expires. Now, you may not add a user to a NIST or LDAP group. Again, we don't, for this exam and for intended purposes for the beginning, because we're only on the beginning stages of our road to becoming a Red Hat certified architect. I'm not going to go over LDAP here, but there is a specialty exam which we will get to, where we're going to go over that, and it's called EX362, EX362, which will talk about LDAP, authentication, and all that stuff, because it's going to involve Active Directory and Windows Server and all that extra stuff. So we're not going to really go over that here. We'll get to that later when we get to specialty exams. But anyway, these options here, which I'll show you the following question that this is talking about. So if you go into sudo, let's do sudo vim etc login.defs, and this also, we kind of left off here yesterday, where you could set the password age maximum days before they have to change their password for everybody that logs onto the machine. Everyone that's using this machine, this is out. It goes for all of their accounts. So like I said, for this, I set it to, so every 90 days, it automatically makes you change your password. And then warn them. This says warn them within a week that hey, your password is about to expire. So there's absolutely no excuses, because it'll prompt them as soon as they try to log on when it gets closer to that time. Now, UMask, which is basically it's another way of locking down the directories and your files as far as like who has access to which directory by default. And this 0, 2, and 2, we'll go over that more when we get into file permissions, because that's what that UMask stuff is relating to, and the same thing goes for home mode. So, that said, that is that file in a nutshell. So let's say, for instance, this user, I'm going to create a user. Today we're going to call this user add. Now we're going to do it the fancy method. I'm going to make this. I'm going to have a little fun, and we're going to call this user. Name of the user is I'm trying to think. Who's a good name? Good name, a big name entertainer that we could probably use. I'll tell you what. Let's use Booker T. Let's use Booker T. Booker T is the name of the user. And we'll say -C with his comment. I'm just going to put here Booker T. So he actually has a actual identifying his username. And then that basically press enter. Now you're probably wondering why didn't we specify a home directory and all this other type of thing. Because it's pulling from the this file. Go back to it. etc default user add. So it automatically creates this home directory. It automatically sets up the shell. It automatically sets up any directories that we have stored in scale, which I don't have a directory set there. Expire by default, it just tells you, hey, this is how long as before account expires. We're not going to set any of that really for account expires in this case. We just want to keep it simple. And then all we have to do is reset its password. You can first, let's go through and do password Booker T. Right? Only group is specified username. That's fine. And let's say, for instance, okay, so I'm going to reset his password. And see, so now what it says, all authentication tokens updated successfully, which basically means his password has been reset. But again, we kind of left off with this yesterday. If this was production, would you just end it just like this? The answer is no, because in production, a lot of companies have a compliance and complexity requirements and all that stuff, which is what I want to start to get you into. Remember, we're teaching here for production, the real world, not just for the exam. So if this was the exam, that was all you would have needed to do. So the moment that I'm going to log out of my account, right? And I'm going to show you the behavior of what happens because we didn't specify forcing him to change his password. So when he types this in, he logs in with user, we give him the password, right? And as of right now, types in his password, right? Types in his password that we given, and that lets him in. Now, for the exam, that's all you really need to do. But for production, that's not the most secure way to do his account. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back. Okay? I'm going to go back, log in as me. Now I could, in theory, I could have just logged in under his account, and I could have just done su my username, and it would have got back into my account and made changes. Same way if this was a Mac machine or something like that. But one of the things that you want to do is make the user, and I kind of left off with this yesterday, to make the user change their password. Okay? If I need to make sure that they specifically have to change their password, do -E, and on that person's account, let's say we use do Booker T's account. type my password. And it'll come up with this message that says expiring password for user. The username is Booker T. The password is successful. So now I'm gonna log out, and I'm gonna have him. Let's say we give him the password. We give him his temporary. This is just a temporary password. Now, what I use in production is you want to use a password generator that gives a very complex password. So now let's type in this user. And let's say we issued him this temporary password, right? This looks like this might fail. Whoops. This might fail. And see how it says you're required to change your password immediately? Administrator enforced. So basically -E by itself and then the name of the user, that basically means, hey, you must change your password pronto. So let's say change the current password. Let me set this to this new password. And then that allows him to then change his password. Now, what if one thing they don't mention, and this is not on the RTSA, but this is something you will see when we get to Red Hat security, is this notion of, and I'm going to show you anyway because I think it's very important in a production environment, is if by default when I do what I just did, the minimum number of characters is 8 characters. But if I wanted to change this and change the company policy, let's say I have a compliance requirement that says Barnes IT requires you to set up a 12-character password. Minimum of 12 characters, no questions asked. So, minimum of 12. No, you can't do less than 12. It has to be 12 or more. So this is how I can change the complexity requirements of that password. So if you go into cd etc/security, and notice there's a config file here called pwquality.conf, and if I go into that config file .conf, you guys are following me. Like I said, he's not going to be able to make this change. And by the way, I just want to reiterate before we get into that, he's not going to be able to make changes. And here's why he's not. If we do, let's see, if you do a who am I, it just shows him his username. But if I do an ID, if we do an ID on an account, notice he's not in the wheel group. And by default, when you first install Linux and you set one of the options they give you when you create the user account is make this user an administrator. When you do that, it automatically adds the user to the wheel group. But notice I didn't add him to the wheel group. And again, we can kind of, as you can see, we can go through and I can really lock this thing down even further. So right now, he's not in the wheel group. The only thing he has access to is Booker T. And by the way, in Linux, yes, a user can also be a group. However, just because a user can also be a group doesn't mean they have admin rights to make a bunch of changes. It just means that they have access to, they automatically get to group. And the way you can tell what group, the number way you can tell what group they're in is if I do cat /group. It'll also tell you what group, whether the user account was created, and what group that they're in. So that's another way you can check to see what group they're in. Now, of course, he's not in the wheel group by any means at all. If you could do groups, if we do groups, Booker T, and that's it. This is the only groups he has access to. So that's another way you can check to see what groups he has. In this case, he doesn't have access to any admin groups. He's just a regular user account. That is it. So because of that, if I try to go into that and try to do sudo into that file, I think it's quality. .conf. And he types in his password, right? And let's say, okay, he types in the password, right? And you get this error message. It says, Booker T is not in the sudoers file. The reason being is we didn't give him sudo access to make that change. Now I'll show you, and there's a way we can go in there and make that change, but it has to be either root or the user must have sudo access. And I'll show you what I mean in just a second. So I'm going to do a substitute user and sign in as myself. And what I want to show you is, if you go into etc, actually I'm missing something here, vim /etc /default, no, security pwquality.conf, and this time, this is going to be in the Red Hat Linux security exam, but this is where you could set the amount of characters required. So like this is right here, it's acceptable size, and this also says cannot be set to lower value than 6. So I want to set this to 12. 12, that basically says, hey, your password must be 12 characters. No questions asked. Maximum credits for having digits in the new password is the member number of digits in the new password. Maximum credit for having lowercase less than 0 is the minimum number of lowercase characters in the new password. So you can even set your own complexity requirements. The minimum number of required classes of characters for the new password, which is digits, uppercase, lowercase, and others. Another option you get also is maximum number of allowed consecutive same characters in the new password. So maximum repeat, I could say make that about 3. So you can. That's what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying. Whether to check. This also says whether to check for the words from the crack lib dictionary. So basically, if they set up a dictionary password, it's a dictionary. If they try to set a dictionary password, right now it is set to 1, and if it is set to 1, that means that they cannot use that password. They have to use a mix of numbers, letters, symbols, and other characters. They cannot use their, if this is set to 1, they cannot use their username as their password. This is enforced by the PAN module. Prompt the user and most amount of times before returning with an error. The default is set to 1. So we try. I can set that up to 3 times. I usually set this to be a little nicer. I'll set this up to 6. So after 6 times, their account, it will come up with an error, and their account is at about 6 times. It just will not let them in. So that's where you can go if you want to set the stuff about changing their the quality of what type of passwords the users are putting in. If we go over to security, there's another one called here, and I usually check these, but one thing I can check is cat pw history confa. Oops. And the number of passwords to remember. So the last 10 passwords. This is the directory where the last passwords are kept. The default is /security/o_password. And if I check what's in that directory, and that in that security directory /o password, this is what comes up. And yes, you need root access to be able to make these types of changes. But there's nothing, looks like there's nothing there. Let me log in as root. Just a second, just see if I can at least cat security password. And as you can see, there's nothing there. And that's where it stores the password. But as you can see, there's nothing there. Okay? So we'll log back on under my account. But yes, that is where you can go if you want to set those lovely, you can set up those complexity, those nice, lovely complexity requirements. The other thing that I should probably mention about a user account is their accounts. I set mine to where the accounts expire after 90 days. So if they have not, they can expire after 90 days from when you start. So you can do it that way. Now, you can automate that process, which we'll get into when we get into scripts, but you can automate that process on what their date is and when their password expires via automation and scripting. One other thing that I should probably mention about, is if I need to add about vsudo, which is where you go into and you decide, hey, these are the commands that the user has access to. By default, the root account, it says here, allow root to run any commands anywhere. So this basically says, hey, this root account can run any and all commands. Now, you can take that out if you're really good. To really lock this down, you can actually take that line out. That says allow root to run any commands anywhere. And so basically what it says is the root account can't make any changes at all. Now, what if, let's say, I need Booker T to make a change in that Etsy file, this one little file that I need him to make changes into. So now, if we do this, I'm just going to put a comment. Allow users to set the password complexity requirements. Right? Okay. So this will say, I'm going to click Booker T. This is going to be the user. This right here is all equals all. This says, hey, you can do this to any and all machines. Connect to any machine that's connected to the machine, whether it's via SSH or not. So this any and all machines. And this section here that says all, this basically means any and all commands. Well, remember, we only want the user to set the password complexity requirements. So if I'm going to say all, so to do this, I'm going to say all equals all in parentheses, and we'll say etc security password pwquality.conf. Basically just put it as this, and also run those little commands where they can access. Another thing you can give them is they have access to Vim. Okay, so it says okay. So I'm gonna also add him to. If we go back up, let's see. If we go back at the top here. You can comma out which files they have access to. Okay, so let's go back over here. This is it. User libvim. Okay. And let's say Now I'm going to sign back into him, into his account. Okay. And that will let him right back into his account. Substitute the user, so that takes him back into that account. And then now, let's see now, can he make changes to that file in question? Oops. Sorry about that. I forgot I need to put a / here. Okay. Let me say. That's right. Okay. Oh, that's right. Because I didn't grant permissions. We'll get into permissions a little later. So it'll say, sorry, this user is not allowed to execute as root on this machine. Alright, so let's go back. That's fine. Let's go back into vsudo. So this is sudo. Okay. Go back in. Of course it did, because I put the wrong password. Of course it did. Alright, now, this machine, so what I want to do, okay, so this, what I want to do is, we want to go back into sudo vsudo. Okay? Now, I'll press I. So this is where you set up the commands. So, let's see. Alright, so let's cut that. So this is how you set if you want the user to run certain commands. Right? That's exactly how you would run those. This says, this allows users of the users group to be able to mount and unmount. And then this section says allows members of the users group to shut down this system. So if they're in this users group, they can shut down the machine via this system here. Okay? So in this case, he has access to Vim. So now, when we run, hold on, I'm going to log back on as him, and let's see what happens here. Let's see if he has access. So let's do this. Let's do sudo vim etc security pw_poly.conf. See if he can now use them. Oh, not the execute. Oh, of course. So that's the same thing. Alright. So let's see. I just want to make sure this is set correctly. But alright. Alright, so I think I know what's going on. Let's see, for instance, if I didn't need him to need a password to run this, let's say you wanted to do the user and like you didn't want to where he doesn't need to input a password to run the command. I just say, hey, instead of setting all, because if I do it as it is now, what's going to happen is he should be able to run this, but it's going to ask him to enter his password. But if you don't want him to enter a password, just put no password. And then say user bin. Okay. And then I'll say hold on a second. I'm just going to log back up the substitute user, log back onto him. Okay. Sudo vim etc security pw quality.com. And let's see what error. So now, so see how he can now get into the ewquality.com file? That's because I gave him access to Vim, so he could go in and edit these. Now in production, of course, I would never give him access to Vim. So what I would do is I would just grant him permissions to the full directories that I want him to have access to, and that's about it. So he can use Vim to make any changes that he wants. But the Vim is dangerous. Vim is dangerous because if he could use Vim, and he becomes disgruntled, he can take over and destroy your entire infrastructure. So we don't want him having access to Vim. We want him to have access only to certain directories. And if so the way you do this, I'm going to change that because we don't want him to have access to Vim like that. But I could make it where he can do, remember, if he wants to, he can do touch. I'm going to say touch. He can create a file, but he can't edit the files. So let's say, alright, I gave him access to the touch command, which is in the user then directory. Now, let's let him hop back on. So can he do he can do touch, so he can do like sudo touch .txt. He can do that, but if he tries to do this, Vim, see how it's still going to ask him for a password to get to it? And if he tries to have his password, it won't let him. It won't let him. Because he's not allowed to execute Vim at all. He's only allowed to create files, and that's it. He can't go in and edit the files. It has to go through another person to do it. So this is good for security purposes. Now, if you want him to get access to a file and you want to allow him to make changes to it, I'll show you in a second how you can go about doing it. But you could basically make it to where, okay, so he only has access. He doesn't have access to Vim. He can't edit anything. The only thing he can do is copy. He can make directories, but he can't edit any files. So something to kind of keep in mind. That's the error that's going to come with. So vsudo, very, very useful in order to lock down an account. The only way you can lock down an account is using this, which is chmod. And let's say, for instance, which I want to go over this now about file permissions. Basically, just do the number method, which is 1 to 7. 7 being full permissions. 6 is read write. 5 is read and execute. 4 is just read permissions. And then you have, you also have, in addition, you have 2 is write, 1 is execute, and 3, if you really want to use 3, you can use it. It's pretty simple, but it's pretty much your preference. But the main, like I said, 3, I believe, which I don't even use 3 that often at all. You can use 3 if you want to, but I've never used 3. Use 3 at all. I just find it very useless. But the main ones that you need to know are going to be 4 through 7, honestly, and 0. 0 and 4 through 7. 0 means that there's no permissions. They can't do anything. They can't read it. They can't see the file. They can't write to it, and they can't make changes. They can't even run the file. So, this is actually super important. I thought I'll share this, and I'll probably put it in the description. It's write and execute, which, by the way, that's what it is. 3 is write and execute. It's very, very useless. I've never used it. This is the best way, and I actually posted later in the script, the YouTube, in the description of this video, in the description below. This link, I think, this makes it a lot easier for you to understand octal values and things like that. But super important. The command to make the change is chmod, and only root or someone with pseudo privileges can make those type of changes. So let's say, for instance, okay, I wanted to grant him access to make a change in let's say for instance, okay, I want to allow him to make changes to that config file, but only that config file. So just do sudo chmod, and anyone who has, so by the way, let's show you the defaults of that file, shall we? Let's go to the etc/etc/security, do an ls-al, and as you can see, this is by default on this file. This is set by default by the operating system. So the users have, this is the left hand side, D is for directory. If you see a dash line, this first line means that this is just a file. R is for read, W is for write, X, if there was an X, it would be to execute, to actually run the file. This group is for the users, this group is for the groups, and then the third section is for others outside of the user and the group. So you can make a change right here. You could actually, you could actually make a little change here. Right now, as it stands right now, others have read permissions, but that's about it. So let's say, for instance, okay, he wants to, let's say, okay, I want, can Booker T see what's in that file? Of course he can't, because in vsudo, I specifically said that he only has access to touch, so he can't even edit them. He can't even edit them. But can he go in and see what's in that file? Okay, this is the big question that people have, is like, okay, so can he see what's in that file? Well, check this out. I'll show you that he cannot see what's in that file, and I'll explain why. So even though, if he tries to change directories, first off, if he tries to change directories, what happens? He still can change directories, but he can't. He can still change directories, but what he can't do is he can't go in. Can he go in and cat this file? Yes, he can. Yes, he still can. He can still see it, but he can't make changes to it. So he can't make changes to it. And the reason he can't make changes is because it's very simple, actually. Let's do. If he tries to make changes to this right now, it's going to give him an error, and it's going to say he does not have permissions to do this. Watch. He can, which he can vim into it, but he can't make changes to it because this is read only. He's a regular account. So even if he tries to make a change, see, because it's read only, because he's a regular user account, he can't make changes. And if he tries to do it through sudo, which is giving root access to try to make that change, this is what's going to happen to him, because remember in vsudo, we only said he can touch files. So if he says this, sorry, the user is not allowed to execute vim on that file as root on this machine. So yes, he can cat, he just can't, he can see it. He can see it. Now, if I wanted to make it where he can't see it, all I have to do is just something really, really simple. All I have to do, if you look at ls-al, and you look at that file, and it says it only has read permissions, but it can't make changes to it. I can actually go right in there and do a sudo chmod read write, which is 6. Read and execute, and just say, hey, 0, 0 on PW history, or PW quality, I should say, pwquality.com. Which we'll set it back in a second. But I want to show you just the behavior of what will happen when you try to make that change. Now, let's say, for instance, so I can see it, right? Because quality.com, I can still see it because I have read-write permissions to it to make changes. But what if Booker T wanted to try to do the same thing? Okay, what if Booker T wanted to try and do the exact same thing? Can he do it? Let's see. Do cd etc security. I'm just going to change. I'm just going to log on to that directory and do a vim or cat pwquality.com, and you'll see he gets the permissions denied. Now, what changed from before he was able to see it? Well, guess what? Do a ls-al, and look at this. Only the user, which is root, or someone with sudo access can go through and make that change. This is the current user. That's what this is. This section is the current user, which is in this case the owner, or someone with sudo access can go through and make that change. Because Booker T is not the original creator of this file, he can't go in there and make change. He can't see. He's not gonna be able to see what's in those files. So you can lock it down to where others outside of you can't see stuff like configuration files and things like that. Now, can he try to wipe the machine or try to? He can try, but this is what's going to happen if he tries. Okay, if he tries to, get all upset, get all butthurt, and say, "Well, you know what? I'm tired of this company, and you terminated me. Let me go ahead and take over your infrastructure because I'm so upset." Well, guess what? If he tries, let's see what happens if he tries. It won't let him. It won't let him. Because vsudo says, hey, Booker T, you only have access, and I'll show you. Let's go back under me for a second. And let's do vsudo. Yeah. Go back over here. Said, hey buddy, you only have access to Dutch, buddy. You don't have access to remove anything on this machine. So he can try, but I always recommend these. My point is, you want to do best security practices as much as possible. I can go right into vsudo and say, hey, because I have root access or I have sudo access. He doesn't have access, and he's not in the wheel group. He's not in the wheel group. Make sure he's not in this wheel group. Although, you can comment it out and make it to where he doesn't have that wheel group doesn't have access. So even if you're in the wheel group, just because you're in the wheel group doesn't mean you have all access to do whatever you want. I could literally just comment this, and if I comment that, guess what? And I try to make a little change, guess what? And I try to DNF search, let's see, sudo DNF install WWE. This message is going to show up. I'm not in the sudoers file. Why? Because I specifically disabled the wheel group from making any changes. So if you're in that wheel, just because you're in that little wheel group, I can save the wheel group. That's actually best practice. But anyway, now to re-enable it back, oh, you've got to do it. Can I get back into vsudo? No, I can't. Again, because even though I'm in the wheel group, as you can see right here, as you can see right here where it says wheel, I still don't have access because this has been commented out. So what that means is, even though you're in the wheel group, just commenting that out takes anybody that has wheel access and it disables them from being able to run and take over an entire infrastructure. So that is good security right there. Now, to bring it back, I'm going to log in as root, because I think I still have the root account enabled. So the root account is still enabled. I can then go through, and as long, like I said, as long as you have either the root account enabled, at least you should have one account that has full access, and you want to safeguard that one really, really closely. It's your global admin account. It's just one admin account. You never tell anybody about that global admin account. You keep that within yourself, and you only give people just as they need. So let's say, for instance, I can go back, I can fix that by going to vsudo from the root, because remember, right over here, this is allow root to run any command anywhere. I can even go through where it says I can comment this line right here, and if I comment this line right over here, guess what? Just because you're the root account doesn't mean you can do whatever you want on this machine. But for starter, for kickers, I'm going to go ahead and re-enable this wheel group. Okay? And you can make a lot, and this is really, really cool. So I'm going to go ahead, re-enable the wheel group, and then now, let's say if I try to do this DNF install, see what happens. It still works. Now we're back working again. So that is the beauty of locking down what commands and what things they have access to. So this is where you can see all the commands like CP and stuff. Do under ls al user bin, and there's two of them. One of them, and each of these are like zlas and zdump. I'm just gonna type it on less to make it easier to read. But as you can see, like I said, bootctl, bccat, a lot of CD. You can even lock them down to where they can't. They need sudo access. My point is that they need root access. You can lock them down based on, okay, this is what you're given, and that's it. So if you needed to run it as sudo, but you can't. Like I said, moral of the story is best practice: lock this down. Give only the users only what they need to do their job, and that is it. Don't give them global admin. Never give them global admin. The other thing that I recommend doing in a production environment, which is something that, I mean, on the exam, obviously you can run everything as root if you want. So that way you don't have to run sudo every time. But you can, but on production, always disable this root account. So the way you do it, just disable this root account. This will be the last part I'm going to go over today, so I can enjoy the rest of my Saturday. But anyway, but let's do this. Let's go to Etsy password and see where it says. So as you can see, these are different accounts. That X stands for the password, sort of. It's encrypted. It's an encrypted password. And if you look over here where it says SBIN, no login, that basically means it automatically disables the account. So that means that account cannot log in. That's what that means. So that you see these ones with Ben Bash, they can actually log on. And then some of these, like Apache and things like that, these are essentially, as you can see, these are service accounts. The only one that's not zero is will always be the root account. But if you want to disable it, a couple ways, but this is the best way. Is do /SBIN, no login. So now guess what? Try logging in the root now. Let's see. If you try logging in the root, says this account is currently not available. So that is a good way to secure your server, is make sure that root account is disabled and only give certain groups access to what they need, not global on everything. But that's about it. That's all that I have for today. Thank you all very much for checking in and tuning in. And we'll be back on Monday as we will continue more about permissions, users, and groups. Have a good one.